You were the child who was never a problem. You didn't cry for attention, you didn't make scenes, you didn't demand anything. You were the easy one, and somehow that became the loneliest thing about you. You learned to read the room before you could read books. You noticed when someone was tired, stressed, or about to snap, and you made yourself smaller so they wouldn't have to deal with you too. You ate what was given, wore what was handed down, smiled when you were supposed to, and stayed quiet when you weren't. You became an expert at not needing anything. You said, "I'm okay," so often that you almost believed it. You comforted others before they even asked, but when your own chest felt heavy, you swallowed it down and kept going. And people called you mature for your age, responsible, low maintenance, such a good kid. But somewhere along the way, you stopped knowing what you actually felt. You became so good at managing everyone else's emotions that your own started to feel like background noise, inconvenient, selfish even. You still do this now. You apologize before you've done anything wrong. You say, "No worries," even when your feelings are hurt. You listen for hours to other people's problems, but when someone asks how you are, the words get stuck in your throat. You don't call when you're struggling, you don't ask for help even when you desperately need it, because part of you still believes that being loved means being easy, that the moment you become difficult, complicated, or too much, you'll be a burden. So you stay quiet, you handle it, you keep going. And inside, there's this quiet ache, a feeling that you're watching your own life from the outside, like you're not fully part of it. Almost no one knows how tired you really are. This pattern often begins in childhood, but not usually because of anything dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it starts in homes where there was already a lot going on. Maybe there was a sibling who needed more attention, someone who was sick, struggling, or simply louder. Maybe a parent was overwhelmed, depressed, anxious, or just emotionally unavailable. Maybe the adults around you were dealing with their own pain, and there simply wasn't room for yours. Sometimes the family was calm on the surface, but big emotions were never really welcome. Anger, sadness, or neediness made things uncomfortable. So you learned that being small and agreeable kept the peace. You weren't neglected in the traditional sense. You were fed, clothed, cared for. But emotionally, you learned that your needs came second, or third, or not at all. Many therapists call this emotional invisibility. It's not what was done to you, but what was missing. And because you were perceptive, because you could feel the emotional temperature of your home, you adapted. You became the child who didn't add to the chaos, the one who made things easier, the helper, the peacekeeper, the one who never complained. And it worked. You were praised for it, told you were so mature, so independent, so easy to raise. And in a home where things felt unstable or tense, that praise felt like safety. It felt like love. Over time, you discovered that being good and easy earned you safety and occasional warmth, so you kept doing it. You turned down the volume on your own needs until you could barely hear them yourself. It wasn't because you were weak, it was because you were smart. You figured out what worked to stay safe and loved in the environment you had. But something else happened too. You started to internalize the belief that your worth was tied to how little you asked for, that love was something you earned by being convenient, that your feelings were less important than keeping the peace. You learned to monitor yourself, to scan for signs that you were becoming too much, to shrink your emotions before they could inconvenience anyone. And you became so skilled at this that it stopped feeling like a choice. It just became who you were.
The cost of being the easy one doesn't show up all at once. It accumulates slowly, quietly, over years. You start to notice it in the exhaustion, not the kind that comes from doing too much, but the kind that comes from holding too much in, the kind that sleep doesn't fix. It's the exhaustion of constantly monitoring yourself, constantly editing your feelings, constantly making sure you're not too much. You feel it in your relationships. You're often the listener, the supporter, the one people turn to when they're struggling. And you're good at it. You care deeply. But when it's your turn to be vulnerable, something stops you. You minimize what you're going through. You change the subject. You convince yourself it's not that bad. And so people never really see you. They see the version of you that's easy to be around. Calm, capable, fine. But you're not always fine. You feel it in the loneliness, the kind that exists even when you're surrounded by people, because you've learned to connect by giving, not by being. You know how to be there for others, but you don't know how to let others be there for you. And so you're close to many people, but truly known by almost no one. You feel it in the numbness. Sometimes it's easier not to feel at all. You can go through entire days feeling nothing, not happy, not sad, just hollow. You struggle to answer simple questions like, what do you want, or how do you feel? Because you've spent so many years answering whatever is fine that you genuinely don't know anymore. And underneath it all, there's often a deep, aching sadness. The sadness of never having been fully seen as a child. The grief of realizing that your greatest achievement was becoming invisible. There's a version of you that's still waiting to be asked how you really are, waiting for someone to notice that you're not fine, waiting for permission to stop being so easy all the time. And that waiting is exhausting.
If this feels familiar, I want you to know something. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive or too quiet or too much. You are not selfish for wanting to be noticed now. What you did was remarkable. You created a survival strategy that protected you when no one else could or would. You developed an incredible emotional intelligence, the ability to sense what others need, to create harmony, to hold space without demanding any for yourself. That quiet strength, that's intelligence, that's resilience, that's love, even if it was one-sided for a long time. You adapted, you survived, and that's not weakness, that's extraordinary. But adaptation that once protected you can also trap you. The skills that helped you survive as a child, the quietness, the self-sufficiency, the constant monitoring of others' emotions, can make it harder to be fully yourself as an adult. You don't owe anyone your smallness anymore. The fact that you were easy to raise doesn't mean you were less worthy of attention. The fact that you didn't cause problems doesn't mean you didn't have problems. The fact that you learned to manage alone doesn't mean you should have had to. Your feelings were never too much. They were just inconvenient to people who didn't have the capacity to hold them, and that was never your fault. Many people have lived exactly like this. You are not alone in it. And the fact that you're still here, still carrying this with such gentleness, that says something beautiful about you. You were the child who was never a problem, the quiet one, the one everyone could count on to just be fine. And because you were fine, you slowly became invisible. But you don't have to keep being invisible. You also don't have to become loud or dramatic overnight. There's a softer path, slowly beginning to notice yourself the way you've always noticed everyone else. Your needs are not a burden. Your feelings are not too much. You're allowed to take up space, gently, honestly, and in your own time. You were never the problem. You were the solution everyone else needed. And now, perhaps, it's your turn to be the one who finally sees you. You are here. You matter. And you are already enough, exactly as you are. Thank you for letting me speak to the part of you that's been waiting to be seen.